Hey, just Done Up here from Expert Photography, and I'm back again for part 2 of my Milky Way photography guide. So in the previous video we spoke about your camera and its settings, and in this video I want to talk about your gear, hence some of the headgear on my head here. So looking at your camera, we got the lens and the body, and they're two separate parts. And the thing I want to stress the most about this is that it is not nearly as important as you think it may be. So obviously, as a professional photographer, I'm going to want to use a full frame camera and an ultra wide angle lens, but it's not cheap gear, it's expensive kit. It's a few $1,000s worth of gear right in my hands here. And I know that's not attainable for every photographer. And the good news is that's not an issue. You can still get photos of the Milky Way if you're using an 18mm lens on your, the kit lens that came with your entry-level digital SLR, as long as you set it to f3.5. Now, sure, there are compromises when you do this. You don't get the same field of view and you have to change your settings. And ultimately, you're going to have to increase your ISO, which will create more digital noise, but you'll still get photos of the Milky Way and it will still be super, super impressive. I use this kit because it works well for me and it's my day-to-day kit anyway. The lens I bought especially, it was a few $100s, but it is worth every penny if you are in as much love with Milky Way photography as I am. But just remember, it's not as important as you may think it is. You'll still get the photos, it's just a matter of prioritizing the exposure. So when you prioritize, when I take Milky Way photos, I prioritize the shutter speed, because I know I don't want to have longer than 35 seconds or I'm going to see star movement in the sky. And I also know that I don't want to have too high of an ISO, but I'm happy to leave my aperture at as wide as it will go. So I'm always happy to compromise, and that's what creating exposure is. In an ideal situation, it would just be a handheld, perfectly sharp, deep depth of field photo, but it's the middle of the night. That is never, I highly doubt that will ever be a reality. So just remember that, you can still do it with your basic gear. So that's the camera. Now I want to talk about some accessories. Let me just put this down. All right, number one, the elephant in the room, the head torch on my head. We've got two settings. We have got an LED, white LED here, which will help me to see, which is great for when you're walking and you're trying to get to wherever you're going to take a photo. And the second setting here, other than off, is red. The red is super useful because you can, and this folds down by the way, you can actually look around and use the red head torch, and then when you turn your head torch off again, your eyes don't have as much of an adjustment to look at the night sky. So think about that. If you're using a white head torch and you go and look at the back of your camera and you turn it off again, your eyes are being blinded, you're like, oh, I can hardly see. If it's red, you do not have the same problem. It's much easier. So when you're looking for a head torch, make sure it's got a red LED. So the second thing is I've got these gloves on. The gloves are really useful in the nighttime because I don't know where you live, but personally, everywhere I go in the middle of the night, we're talking 3, 4 in the morning, even at midnight, I'm cold. I'm from England, I live in Budapest in Hungary at the moment, and I'm freezing cold. So I've been making good use of these gloves. But you really need to make sure that you're A, dry and warm, and B, that you can use your gloves while using your phone. Now, the reason I say phone is because the phone has a whole host of different apps on here that you can use for Milky Way photography. There's star finding apps, and one of the most important things, and if you don't have a smartphone, you can definitely go and buy one of these for a few bucks, is a compass. It will help you to find out where you're going, where the stars are in the sky, and really help you to get your bearings. So it's always important. I can show you here, I can open up my phone, I can move it around with these gloves on, because they're called E-tip gloves. They're North Face, but you can go on Amazon or eBay and there's $10 gloves that have E-tip touchscreen gloves. So that's one that you don't need to worry about too much, really easy to find. The next thing I'm going to show you is, this is called a trigger trap. Now this is basically a whole magnitude of different options. It's an intervalometer, it's a remote. You plug this into your camera and this goes into your phone. And if you notice here, I use an iPhone 7 with no 3.5mm jack, so I've got the adapter, still works. And what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to fire photos from my phone, and I can set it up to continuously take photos, which is really useful. That's what an intervalometer does. And I also don't have to touch the camera while I'm taking a photo if I'm using this, which reduces camera shake. Another accessory, always you should have this with you, is spare batteries. Spare batteries, 30 seconds exposures, you start taking 100 of those, your battery's dead. You know, your camera might say, oh, we can take 500 photos on a battery. Not when you're taking 30-second exposures, especially not if you're doing high ISO noise reduction. It does not last very long at all. Make sure you have at least one extra fully charged battery. That's usually enough. I'd recommend 2, because the last thing you want is to get out there and taking like the most amazing photos you've ever taken and then have to think, all right, well, I'm not going to make it all the way through the night with these batteries. I need to conserve. So always bring extra batteries. Now finally, the last part of this video is I'm going to talk about my tripod. So my go-to tripod is what this camera is on right now, but I've been traveling for the past 2 years and this is what I've had with me. And I've been really impressed with it. It's a small Manfrotto tripod, and although, I mean, there's so many tripod brands, so many tripod legs, you're really sport for choice, but I'm going to show you why this tripod is good for Milky Way photography. So first things first is we have a ball head, and you can change the head on most tripods. What this allows me to do is set it to almost any single angle. If you've got one of those old tripods where you do like one axis like that and another axis like this, and it's on like this flimsy bit of plastic, A, it's not sturdy, and B, it's really hard to use. A ball head makes your job much easier. You can get, I think Amazon Basics even sell a ball head these days, so they're not expensive and they're really good for Milky Way photography. The second thing I'm going to look at is the legs. So these legs move all the way out and they are independent from each other. If you have, in fact, let me step back, you'll see, if you have a tripod where there's a connection between the legs like this, what you're going to find is that you can't get into all the positions that you want. And these do lock. If I want them to lock, they'll lock. So that's something to bear in mind. Make sure that the legs move independently. A third thing is that on this leg here, you'll see that there is kind of a rubber grip. Just walking around in the cold, it's nice to be able to grab something that's not freezing cold aluminium. That's a nice little feature. And something this tripod doesn't have, but I'd recommend looking for. It doesn't have it because it's a travel tripod. It was $100 and it really compromises for the size. It folds up super small. And I've been traveling with just a backpack, so to have something that fits in there is really useful. Is somewhere around here, on this part of the frame, you'll often find a hook. That's a weight hook. That will hold your tripod down on the ground and keep it more sturdy. So if you buy a light tripod, like maybe you get a carbon fiber one or anything that's plastic, you'll probably want to be able to weigh it down so that the breeze or a slight, well, knocks are still going to be recorded, but you don't want to knock your tripod over. So look for one with a weight hook too. So that's basically it. I've talked about your camera and why it's really not as important as you think it might be. You look at these photos, these beautiful photos of the Milky Way, and you think, God, I wonder what gear they use. It doesn't have to be that difficult. Secondly, I spoke about all the accessories I use. My gloves, my hands are very warm right now. And we look at the trigger trap and we look at batteries and head torches, the most important thing is a head torch probably. And then the tripod, obviously essential. You can't take photos of the Milky Way without this, unless you're incredibly lucky to find a bit of rock that points up exactly where you want it to look, and it's going to stay there. That being said, I still wouldn't want to put my camera on it. So that's part 2 of the Milky Way photography series. Thanks very much for watching. If you're interested in Milky Way, check out what we have below. We just released a brand new course on Milky Way photography, and it covers everything from your gear, the apps we use for photography, how to fill the frame with a foreground interest, how to light that foreground interest, everything you possibly want to know, as well as how I took the majority of the photos on this page, and I took them all. It's all beneath this video right now, and you can learn all about Milky Way photography. So go ahead and check it out and let me know what you think. Thanks very much for watching.